November 4th, 2021. This is the Daily Rob, and I know you're looking at that like button right now, and you really want to click it. That subscribe button as well. And those keys on the keyboard are just singing to you to type us out something nice. And if you hate looking at us, despite our very fancy backgrounds, hey, go listen to us on all major podcast platforms. Now, drum roll, please, for the one, the only, Rob Smith.
Hello, folks. Stu, how could anybody not want to look at you? I mean, 97% of the fan mail we get is from young women who like, that's Stu. Give me his number. I like looking at him. That's the number one comment. I like looking at him.
Very scruffy. A little rough around the edges.
They must like the scruffy look. Stu, I see you're still at the White House. Did you sleep there last night?
Yeah, it's really cool. I just tell them stuff, so I asked them to redecorate for me. So they gave me a new little setup of the office. So that's pretty cool. And, I was set up in the Trump viewing room where he used to watch news all the time. And so I've been keeping an eye on the news today, and I got some hot takes. But yeah, I'm pretty comfortable here. I might make this my kind of winter home.
Well, Sleepy Joe's not going to show. He's not there today. I imagine he spends about 90% of his time in his basement in Wilmington. So I think he could stay there. Nobody would ever notice.
Yes, so we can have him be the president of the United States, and I'll be the El Presidente of the United States. I think that's how I'm taking this forward.
Well, Stu, he can be, to use another Latin term, he could be the de jure president, and you could be the de facto president.
Right
How's
on.
that sound?
That works for me.
All right, you have a promotion. I decree.
Okay. So what news stories are you looking at today?
Stu, we had an election yesterday, and 2 days ago, but it was somewhat of a bombshell, landslide, realignment. You can call it a lot of things. Here in Virginia, we had our governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general all go Republican. The General Assembly, which was picked up 7 seats, so the Republicans are going to have a majority there as well. Interesting, when you look at the results, pretty much every jurisdiction moved in the direction of the Republicans. What astonished me was what I call the real Virginia. When you get out of Richmond or Northern Virginia and go to some of these counties, they had astonishingly high rates of percentages for the Republican candidates, Glenn Youngkin for governor, and actually all 3 of them. I mean, they were in the 80 percentile, which is astonishing. So I'm very pleased, as most of the people I know. But I think we're seeing somewhat of a realignment, Stu, and I've always said this, in that what I think the Republican Party is moving to are people, regardless of whether they're blue collar or white collar, who actually do things, who are actually in the real world and use their practical knowledge to get things done. The Democrats seem to be those who want to suck off the government teat, and those who have either worked for the government or have some sort of affiliation with the government from their job or in academia. So anyway, it's I feel good about it, Stu. I tell you, with all the election fraud, I was very apprehensive that things would work out. I thought the Republicans would win the popular vote all the way down the line, but I didn't think, wasn't so sure we would actually win because of all the voter fraud we saw in 2020. And I must say, Stu, there's still voter fraud out there. I mean, it's so transparent when city of Richmond doesn't even report a vote until after 9 o'clock, and Fairfax County holds back all of its votes until late. Why would you do that? What is the reason to do that other than you're trying to see how many votes you need to win? Fairfax County has cheated. We know that. The Republicans had over 500 lawyers on the ground. They had poll watchers. It was much harder to cheat yesterday than it has been in the past. Matter of fact, some of my sources told me they caught some monkey business in Fairfax that they corrected. But still, even with all this, we've got these old COVID laws out there where you got the mail-in ballots that is just ripe for fraud. We know which side engages in fraud, and there might have been 100, 200,000 votes in well, I don't know if it's that many, but there were a lot of votes in Fairfax that were probably fraudulent. Same with the city of Richmond, and probably the same with Petersburg and Norfolk. So that's something that has to be fixed. Though if it is fixed, I feel pretty good about the realignment. Also feel is really interesting in New Jersey. Again, speaking of voter fraud, I think you say Cettarelli, right? The Italian Republican was running against Murphy, and he led all night. And apparently in Hudson County, they counted some of the votes for Murphy twice. And in Bergen County, it was reported that Cettarelli, the Italian guy, had 52% of the vote to Murphy's 48% of the vote, with 100% of the vote in. All of a sudden, after 11 o'clock, it flipped. Cettarelli had a 42,000 vote lead. It sunk down to 1,600. What's the explanation for that? So I think we're going to see one thing about when it's just one state is you can have much more focus on the fraud than you would of a 50 state contest. So that's going to be interesting to see. The other thing really interesting is there's a truck driver who spent $153. He's a Republican. He ran against the, I think they call it the president of the Senate, Steve Sweeney. Been there for 42 years or something like that. And he is leading by 2,000 votes. That might be the biggest upset of the century. But again, it's just kind of realignment of blue collar folks and what I would call white collar folks who actually do something. So Stu, other than that, we have criticisms of what happened in Virginia. Sheila Jackson Lee, the Mensa candidate in the House, said that racism raised its ugly head in Virginia. Of course, in Virginia, the triumvirate, white guy, black woman, Latino guy, but it's racism. The other brilliant talking head, Joy Reid, said, you have to be willing to vocalize that these Republicans are dangerous, that it isn't a party that's just another political party that disagrees with us on tax policy, that at this point they're dangerous. They're dangerous to our national security because stoking that kind of soft white nationalism eventually leads to the hardcore stuff. So if you make a whole campaign about how evil white people are and how terrible American history is, and call everybody a white supremacist and a racist, and if you defend yourself, then you're dangerous. So anyway, Stu, that's kind of the way the left thinks on this. I hope the New Jersey stuff works out. Two other quick things. There were some referendums out there, and there was a casino in Richmond and the voters voted it down. I thought that was interesting. I was all for that. The other thing that happened today, Stu, is the Fed is tapering their quantitative easing. I think the Fed is a useless body, as you probably know. For those who don't know what quantitative easing is the Fed assumes that if they buy these bonds that are out there from banks, when you buy a bond at a high price, the yield all of a sudden goes down, since a lot of lending rates are based on yield, that somehow, because there are low rates out there, then everybody's going to go borrow a bunch of money and it's going to pick the economy up. Well, Stu, that's not the way the economy works. The economy doesn't work on interest rates or what the Fed does. The economy works on policy and opportunity. Anyway, the market was up today. So, Stu, I've been talking too long. Everyone wants to hear what you have to say.
So, yeah, the election was pretty fascinating to see how that played out. I was not expecting it to be wrapped up so early. I think that goes to show how big of a victory it was. I would like to share this tweet from Jeff Dice out of the Mises Institute. The Clinton crime family is dead and buried. Their political legacy is now sealed. Their sordid consigliere McAuliffe appears poised to lose as state Biden won by 10, full of federal employees, lobbyists, lawyers, and contractors. So that
federal
was
contractors, not the good old boys who build your house. They're all Republicans.
Yes, that was nice to see.
People who suck off the federal teat.
Exactly.
Those kind of contractors.
And this was a fella who was breaking state tradition of wanting to come back and be a Virginia governor for a second term. No one's done that before. And then honestly,
Godwin did it.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he was a Democrat first, then we changed to a Republican. He became a Republican and did it. But I hear you.
And then I'm always a little bit weirded out when these people come from other states and want to be a governor here. And so he's from Syracuse, New York. And I don't want to sound like a hypocrite, because I'm very happy that someone like Winsome Sears has come to Virginia and has laid roots down in Virginia. However, Terry McAuliffe never laid roots down in Virginia. He was here to essentially make this a blue state. And I'm not about that.
He's a Mitt Romney. Oh, I want to have an elected office. I think I'll move to Utah. You're right, Stu. You ought to, when you run for public office, it ought to be because you love where you live and you want to make it better.
Terry finally conceded by email, like a true man of integrity and character does. I'm really excited to see if Ralph Northam will finally let us know if he was the one dressed in blackface or if he was dressed as the Klansman, something that we still don't know to this day.
To this day! You just sit here, you don't know what I'm talking about? Man, I'm out of here, bro. Let's go. Come on, let's go, man.
Brother Walter says that he had on the plaid pants and it's his wife who was the Klansman.
Jesus Christ.
If you look at it, it very easily could be a woman. The Klansman is shorter and has very narrow shoulders.
That's hilarious. If true, that's hilarious.
I mean,
but still unknown to this day. Now, I am really excited about Winsome Sears. She gave a great speech last night.
What you are looking at is the American dream. The American dream
Has a really cool history here in Virginia. And I found an article that was out in the Virginia Pilot probably over a year ago. And it was kind of referring to how her coming back into politics brings up some really tough memories for the Democrats. You know, when she first ran as a delegate and essentially just took over this area that had been in Democratic control for decades. And that should have been the writing on the wall for them, that, you know, this is a unique person you're dealing with. When we're talking about issues, we need to be actually talking about the issues. And I think what we're seeing here with this entire election was that the Democrats weren't willing to talk about whether or not wokeism, CRT are real things. We all know that the critical theory school is a real thing, and it's used in various disciplines all over the place. And we all experience wokeism in some capacity. I doubt there's a person alive who hasn't had a run-in with woke something or other. So Mika and Joe, a beautiful show that's on in the Morning Joe, they addressed this, and they actually had a very earnest conversation about this. I am going to play that clip now.
We need to talk about this around the table a good bit, because the Democrats are going to have to come face to face with this issue of wokeism.
They don't know how to talk local.
Not CRT, but
right.
Wokeism. You have a lot of people saying, oh, he won based on something that's not real, that doesn't exist. CRT or wokeism or whatever you want to call it, I can tell you. I mean, that's all parents talk. I mean, I've said this on the show before. People said, oh, it's just because they're all racist. No, they're lifelong Democrats, and they're talking about what's going on college campuses. They're talking about what's going on in high schools. They are doing it. People can get mad if they want to.
Right.
Don't shoot me, as Elton John said. I'm only the piano player.
Oh, my God.
But this is what we're hearing all the time, wherever we go, when nobody's watching, when the cameras are off, and when people aren't worried about people calling them bigots. It's just happening. And that played out last night in Virginia.
It did play out last night. So, okay, let's go back to your first point. If you've got people going, oh, well, they're just, using this, that this is a cudgel and it's, it's not real and CRTs. And okay, we give you that. Then why don't you have a counter narrative?
I was going to say, if you're making something up against
then have a counter narrative.
Right. If you're making something up that's not true, I'm gonna chase you all over the state, mock and ridicule you, and people are gonna be laughing at you. The fact that he kept bringing this up and Terry didn't have an answer other than to say parents shouldn't be involved in their kids' classrooms. Oh my God, this is real. And if it's not real, then that's just pure malpractice by Democrats from coast to coast.
And so you can see that they came to the conclusion that the Democrats can't just say this doesn't exist. And so I think this is a great example of an issue that was left on the floor that someone picked up. Trump was kind of famous for that. There were all these issues that were just left that no one picked up, and Trump simply started talking about them. Build the wall, bring jobs back to America. These are easy things to talk about that many politicians simply won't, because they're lazy, incompetent, or just in it for themselves. And so we saw here in Virginia how simply talking about giving power back to the parents, respecting parents, was enough to make education the number one topic while we're still dealing with all these COVID restrictions. That should tell you something.
Well, Stu, these politicians are in it. These leftist politicians are in it for themselves, as we discuss all the time. And you see example after example of how they don't care about people. I'd like to say something about Winsome Sears. She's a real threat to the left and the Democratic Party. Stu, I call it like I see it. And you've heard me talk about the dystopian side of the Black community and the dysfunction. But I also, Stu, you've heard me talk about that. I blame a lot of it on white liberals, but I grew up where I actually knew black people, Stu. Wasn't some Harvard grad who the only black people I knew was some guy who was in my class, or I worked for a federal agency where there was somebody. I mean, we grew up in a community. We dealt and lived among black people. And I can tell you, many black people are really conservative. And Winsome Sears can speak for them. And that's going to scare the hell out of the left.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you don't even have people like Van Jones or Jamel Hill who are at least sympathetic to her, and instead, she gets negative PR. She is a threat, because it's kind of the same thing you had with Tulsi Gabbard, where you have this narrative clash where you have an immigrant, woman of color, veteran, business owner, has done philanthropy work with working at the shelter that she started. She's done all these things that in the leftist frame are the identity things that you need to subscribe to have legitimacy. So she's done all these things, has succeeded in all these things. You would imagine, there would be some Democratic kingmaker that would reach out to her and say, hey, why don't you run with us as a very moderate Democrat? But instead, she gets to be an example of, hey, I'm a dynamic person, and the Republican Party is changing. I want to help represent what that change means. I'm a doer. You kind of talked about people who get things done. That's exactly what she is. And when we look at political families, we see these spring up from time to time. And honestly, you don't have too many black political dynasties. Up in New York with David Patterson and his father, Basil Patterson, Basil was a great man, and then David runs into some legal trouble and, gets outed from office. Jesse Jackson Jr. is another example of that. His dad is the famous civil rights activist. Jesse Jackson Jr. ends up misusing campaign funds. So you would imagine when you see the Sears family that you would only want the best for them instead of castigating them as, the worst things they do, as saying, oh, they're just Uncle Toms. I mean, it's just
white supremacist, according to Joy Reid.
Yeah. I mean, it's just baffling to me.
But I know lots of families like hers, and I would say they're interested in their community. They're interested in jobs. They're interested in their church. They're interested in going about their lives. They're very family oriented. And what the leftists and the Democrats try to do is to divide people, and to say, hey, you've been discriminated against, or you deserve this, or you deserve that, and you ought to be mad about this, therefore vote for us. That's not the Booker T. Washington way. And if you really care about people and you've studied sociology and politics at all, you know that the way to help anybody is a hand up and not a hand out. And I think Winsome Sears living her life story is proof of that. And she wants to help people in the same way. And she knows how dangerous it is and unhelpful to the very people she's trying to help to go along with the leftist narrative of to be mad and angry and look for a handout.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's done so many different things all over the board, where that's ideally what you would want in a politician, someone who has so much experience, whether it's Board of Education, working with the VA, being a business owner, being a veteran. I mean,
That's why I like this truck driver. His name is Alan Durr, I think, in New Jersey. I mean, I'd rather have a truck driver hold that office I'm not from New Jersey, but if I were, I'd rather have a truck driver in office than some 40-some year politician who basically sucks off the teat of the government and sells influence. and probably has never done anything practical in his life. You've heard me say over and over again that a lot of people in academia who go to very nice schools, they talk smart, but they're really dumb as shit.
Mhm.
And a lot of these truck drivers types, okay, maybe they slaughter the king's English. Maybe they end a sentence with a preposition. Maybe they even have a toothpick in their mouth from time to time. But they get things done, practical things, and they know the way that the world works. And I'd rather have their judgment than the judgment of these academic elites.
Yeah, I mean, so we saw here in Virginia, we saw white women go back to voting conservative. We saw a 15-point spread amongst Latina populations for Republicans. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, when we're getting into like a 15 to 20-point margin, that's Tim Kaine versus Corey Stewart numbers.
Yeah. By the way, Tim Kaine's such a weasel.
I know I have a Target story about him. Don't you also have a Target story about him?
Had a target story. Mine was I just saw him in the hallway and I speak to people and he's just a little Weasley guy. I look at him, I go, I mean, Stu, I judge other men by how easily it would be for me to beat them up.
Okay.
I could take Tim Kaine with my pinky. Okay.
Well, I ran into Target like at the moment they opened to pick up like some cleaning supplies once, and he was there because I guess he can't go out in public, and so he was like, he said hello to me, and I was post gym, and whenever I'm post gym, essentially my IQ drops 20 points, and I'm more animal.
Place the table. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we ought to tell Coach.
Hell no, you don't want to know about this.
Yeah. Make sure you tell Latimer that the NCAA will be testing on Saturday.
Yeah, baby. Starting defense.
And so he says hello to me, and I scoff, and I just essentially snarl at him and walk away.
Well, good.
I mean, he's a gross fella. But yeah, so.
Well, Stu, you want to know how superficial I am?
How superficial are you?
I couldn't believe he lost to George Allen. George Allen played football at Virginia. He's a big, tall, strapping hoss, good-looking guy with a smoking hot wife. And he loses to Tim Kaine and his wife, who weighs more than I do. And I could not believe that Virginia had turned such that they couldn't vote for the obvious candidate.
Yeah, I mean,
doesn't everybody judge another guy by how hot his wife or girlfriend is?
I think that has some bearing. You know, I mean, Youngkin's wife said it best last night. I married a winner, and we're here to win. I mean, it was a cute moment.
Survival of the fittest, buddy.
Now that we've seen this kind of DeSantis, Youngkin kind of model of, you know, you're kind of very vocal, you attack, but it's a little bit less bulldogish than Trump. Do you think that is the mold? Do you think that is what people should be emulating?
As much as I hate to say this, Stu, because I'm an Aristotelian, in that I don't care what you look, well, unless you're a hot babe or something. I don't care what you look like or how harsh your words are. I'm listening to whether or not it's facts and logic, and whether or not the two of them will propel us to a positive outcome. But I must say, I'm learning, Stu, even at my ripe old age of 41, I continue to learn. And I do think there's a psychology to this, in that Trump was a superstar, but his style was abrasive to many men, but a whole lot of women. And since we unfortunately gave women the right to vote, Stu, we have to contend with them and placate them. And I think Youngkin's style of supporting the policies that Trump did, but being a tall, good-looking guy who is charming and can say things and not be as bombastic, obviously has an appeal. And I think you have to think about that. I hate to say that. I hate to admit that, but there's a psychology. I'm learning that, the way my mind works, I can't understand why anybody doesn't sift through facts and logic to reach what is a logical conclusion. But unfortunately, not everybody does that, and you have to appeal to them in a more of an emotive way that connects with them using facts and logic.
Yeah, I think looking like an LL Bean model and, listening to parents was major for him and definitely helped get that female vote back up.
Well, and the Democrats really stepped in it. I mean, McAuliffe saying that parents don't have any rights to, don't have any say in their public school education, and calling people who show up at board meetings these people, and it shows a mindset. But so they left the door open. They left the lane open for him to drive down it and dunk it.
So on that note, what are today's words of wisdom?
I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud, built on rocks, stronger than oceans, wind-swept, God bless, and teeming with people of all kinds, living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors. And the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get there. That's how I saw it and see it still. How stands the city? And how stands the city on this winter night? More prosperous, more secure, and happier than it was 8 years ago. But more than that, after 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge, and her glow has held steady no matter what the storm. And she's still a beacon, still a magnet for all who must have freedom, and for all the pilgrims from all the lost places who are hurtling through the darkness toward home. We've done our part. And as I walk off into the city streets, a final word to the men and women of the Reagan Revolution, the men and women across America who for 8 years did the work that brought America back. My friends, we did it. We weren't just marking time. We made a difference. We made the city stronger. We made the city freer, and we left her in good hands. All in all, not bad at all. That's kind of the way I feel tonight, Stu. This morning, we might be on to something where we're building the city back.
We can only hope.
Thank you, Stu.
Yep.
Enjoy the White House.
I am. It's a fun place to be. I highly suggest it.
I'm going to smoke a cigar here in my library.
Right on. Later.
Go get them. All right. Bye.
See ya.
This is the spirit of Virginia coming together like never before. The spirit of Washington and Jefferson and Madison and Monroe and Patrick Henry of Virginians standing up and taking our Commonwealth back.